Hi there. I'm going to attempt to present for you now a repeat performance of my presentation for the Sheffield Hallam University Method Conference 2016. This will be the first time that I've used a Google Hangout to do this kind of thing, so we'll see how it goes technically. And the first thing I need to be able to do is to share my screen, so we'll have a go at that first and see if we can get that working. And that should be it, we think. Okay, so we see an image here, supposedly humorous, and we can see a sort of a juxtaposition, I think you'd say, between the analog and the digital world, the online and the offline. And I think that's what I want to focus on during the course of this presentation. The tech evangelists might say that the internet changes everything, but and that might be the case, arguably. But as far as we're concerned, it's about our research and the way that the internet changes our methods and what we do. So the particular method that I want to focus on here is a focus group, and it's undertaken through a hashtag chat in Twitter. Now, you're probably familiar with what a focus group is, and doubtless what Twitter is, but not everyone's aware of what a hashtag chat is. So during the course of this presentation, I'll hope to outline that for you. So this is a statement which is not uncommon, and it's what prompted my research. Teachers often make claims like this. In fact, I'd argue that I perhaps said something similar to this in the past. So in a sense, my research is about testing this claim, about exploring the extent to which professional development or professional learning can be undertaken through Twitter and how it achieves that. So first of all, just returning back to focus groups. This is one definition of a focus group. So we gather together a group of people. We give them perhaps a few prompt questions, but we allow them to undertake their own discussion, to drive the discussion themselves. And we're able to sort of take a back seat as the moderator of the discussion and allow it to unfold in the way that it should. We may need to just steer it in certain directions at certain times, but it's about having the opportunity to participate, to see these participants interacting with one another. There are several stages, and if you look down the left-hand side here, we can see the various stages that you go through if you're conducting an offline focus group, and not forgetting our ethics and the ethical considerations that we bring to this. In the online setting, things are no different, but it's when we start to pick apart these individual stages that we see this differences starting to emerge. So in the offline setting, in order to gather together people, we might put out a general call. There may be people who self-nominate themselves, or there may be groups which already exist that we can draw on. So it might be a hobby group or an interest group or a social group. In order to actually recruit them, we can do it the traditional way and send out letters or emails. If it's in a particular institution, there may be notice boards that can be used. Or perhaps if it is a group which pre-exists, you may be able to piggyback on a meeting that they already have, one that's scheduled already. And talking of schedule, you do need to arrange a date and time for that. Not always easy if there's several people involved. And then you need to think where it'll take place. Are you going to invite them to the place where you would normally conduct your research, or will you go to their location or meet somewhere in the middle? And bear in mind, of course, that if we allow the participants to choose the location, we're in a sense relinquishing some of the power that we would have as a researcher and starting to address that power imbalance. Now, if we go into the online world, as I said, this was looking at how a focus group could be undertaken through a hashtag chat on Twitter. Here's an example of a hashtag, and in particular it's the first ever, as far as we're aware, hashtag chat that was undertaken on the theme of education, and it began in the States. And essentially what happens is you visit Twitter, you put the hashtag into the search box, and then in the Twitter stream all you see are tweets that contain that hashtag. So anyone who's participating elsewhere will have put that hashtag into their tweets, and you can see what they're saying. Similarly, if you wish to join in, you put the hashtag in and your tweet will be added to that Twitter stream. So anybody else that's filtering on that hashtag can see all the tweets that are produced by it and participate in the discussion as a result. In order to actually get access to a hashtag, you don't gate crash it in the same way that you wouldn't gate crash an offline meeting. You don't barge in and suddenly take over and start asking your questions. You negotiate access through a gatekeeper. Twitter chats, for example, often have moderators who convene the meetings, so you'd approach them in the first instance and explain the research that you'd like to undertake. When it takes place, well, here's a screenshot of a single week. It's a Google Calendar, and if you look down the top left-hand side, we can see that it's US-centric from the time zones that are available. We can see that we've got pretty much every day of the week there are some ed chats, and if you look at the evening slots, and that's evening as far as the US is concerned, you can see that there are perhaps in a single 1 hour time slot, maybe 20, maybe more chats taking place at some point around the world. We can see here one in the UK, ASC chat is Association for Science Education chat, and at 3 PM in the US, that's 8 PM in the evening here in the UK. And we can see that we've even got loads of chats on a Sunday evening, the time when teachers are supposedly having time off. In a sense, it's the weekend. So the where would be it will take place on Twitter, but I think there's a little bit more to it than that. I'll come back to that later. To conduct the group in the offline setting, you would have perhaps 6 to 8 participants who would arrive at the venue at the appointed time. You'd perhaps greet them, you may have arranged some refreshments, you'd start to develop rapport. The role that you'd take as a moderator, as I said earlier, is you probably have just a handful of questions which cover the themes that you want to explore, but you'd be aiming to allow the group, through its discussion, to explore them in more detail and take the directions that they feel are appropriate. In an offline setting, the boundaries are clear. It's the room or the venue within which the discussion is taking place. You have a temporal boundary in that you will have established prior to the meeting a start and a finish time, and you are in a position to be able to draw things to a close. To conduct the group in an online setting, particularly in a Twitter chat, you have no control over how many people are going to turn up. It might be a 1, it might be a 0, it might be 1,000. It just depends on who decides to access that hashtag at that time. Developing rapport is very different. It's not impossible, but it just has to be done in a different way. You don't have the eye-to-eye contact that you do in the offline setting. You can adopt a similar role to that which you would offline, but you have an additional feature because you're online. You're able to engage any individuals that you want in the discussion whilst the main discussion takes place, and you're not seen to be interrupting. If you got half a dozen people in a room and somebody was saying something, you cut across them to talk to somebody else, that would, well, it would be highly inappropriate. But in the online setting, in the chats world, if you will, within Twitter, that's perfectly acceptable. The boundaries are certainly not the same. One might argue that it's within the Twitter realm, but if a tweet contains a link to an external space which is of interest to the topic that's being discussed, do you leave that alone? Well, surely it would have piqued your interest as a researcher and you'd want to follow that up. So all of a sudden you may find yourself in a whole host of different spaces. And the time boundary. Yes, Twitter chats usually take place for an hour, so as a moderator you draw it to a conclusion at the end of the hour. But unlike in an offline setting where once your participants have walked out the door, the data gathering is complete, in an online setting people may continue after the hour is up to discuss the themes that have been covered during the course of the discussion. So you've got an extended temporal boundary. So collecting the data in an offline setting is usually fairly conventional. You may be taking field notes, and you'd probably record it using an audio recorder. Now in an online setting there is no audio. It doesn't stop you, of course, taking field notes in the same way, but you might choose to take screenshots or use a screen recording application to capture the flow of the tweets. But in reality, what you're probably going to do is to try to capture the tweets. Since they're in digital format, that's not a particularly big deal. This is often done anyway as part of any Twitter chat. They're gathered up often using an online application like Storyfy and just gathered together by looking for any tweets which contain that hashtag. You can also use offline applications, and there are plenty of those. There's a couple, NodeXL and NVivo. To process the data, if you've got an audio recording, your first task will be transcription. The actual style of transcription will depend on which particular analysis process you're using. You can use the same tools that you use to capture the data in an online setting. If you captured tweets using Storyfy, you can arrange them in a way whichever you feel is appropriate. You may want to clean up the data. There may be noise in there, so people will often use a hashtag, not thinking or appreciating that the hashtag chat is taking place. So you'll get data in there that's irrelevant to the discussion that you might want to clean up. And similarly, you can use the offline tools for doing that too. You can arrange things in different ways, and you might want to have all the tweets arranged in a temporal fashion, or you might want all the tweets from a particular user. All of that is possible much more easily using these tools. To analyze your data, then you might use one of these techniques. It's entirely whatever's appropriate for your particular research. But in addition, in the online world, because we've been using capturing our data digitally, you can use social network analysis. It's not imperative, but that facility is available to you. That's where you're taking all the traces that have been defined by the links where people have responded to one another and producing a sociogram which shows who's linked with whom, who's been most active, and so on. So that might be an extra feature that is useful. As we said, the location is clearly bounded. This takes place within a room in the offline setting. In the online setting, notionally, it's within the Twitter application, for example. But not everybody will choose to use that. So some might use TweetDeck. So your participants may actually be seeing a very different environment to the one that you are. What are the implications of that? Here's another one. This is Twitter for. And in addition, we have to think about the fact that this may be where the discussion is taking place, but the people who are involved are actually embodied somewhere else. You may have someone who is participating while they're in the bath. Someone else might be participating while they're on the bus on the way home. What kind of an effect does that have when people aren't co-located in the way they are in the offline setting? And similarly, we have to think about visibility. Everyone in this room here can see everyone else. If someone's not paying attention, then it's obvious. If someone's on their phone or staring out the window, you can tell. In the offline setting, that's not necessarily the case. They may be involved in an entirely different activity. Does that matter? There may be people who are participating who are not visible because they're not tweeting. Does that matter? Or actually, are they participating? So there are some additional questions that we get in an online setting that we don't have in the offline. Our ethics are fairly standard for an interview. We're able to provide participants with an information sheet prior to the research, which outlines everything that might be expected of them and gives them the opportunity to be able to make a decision before they provide their consent, which will be done usually by signing a form when they attend the session. And also be aware, you'll have made them aware, that they have the right to withdraw at any time, and that's without prejudice or any untoward things occurring as an outcome of that withdrawal. So we also have the opportunity to debrief them before they leave the meeting. When we go into the online world, however, things are rather different. Oh, let's not forget that the offline setting is private, assuming that it's taking place within a room which isn't public. So you might have chosen to meet in a cafe, but there'd nevertheless be a sense in which the group that is talking around a table is having a private discussion. So in the online setting, providing a sheet is irrelevant, but we may be able to provide participant information prior to a discussion by providing a link to a web page with all the similar information on. But the question comes regarding consent. There are those who will argue, and research has been done, where Twitter is considered to be a public space. The terms of service state that anything that you tweet may be seen by anyone across the world who's using Twitter. So the question then arises for us as researchers, is consent necessary? And if it is, how do we actually get it when we don't know who will be turning up to the group meeting? And of course, do people have the right to withdraw? And one might say that, well, yes, they do at any time. It's so easy just to close that browser window. Much more easy, one might argue, than choosing to get up and walk out of a room. Maybe. And then debriefing. You can, of course, provide some information at the end of the discussion. But as with participants arriving for a group discussion on Twitter, you've no idea when they actually arrive, and you've no idea when they leave. They may arrive at the beginning of the session or halfway through. They may leave halfway through. So that debriefing information can only be done as a sort of close to the session. But we can't be sure that we've reached everybody. So there are a lot of things to think about there. I guess what I'm saying is that I've presented this as black and white, as an online and offline, an analog and a digital, but to some extent there are things which cross over, and there are certainly grey areas. So I'll just show you some of the references that informed what I've just been talking about, and hope that well, if we pop back to our Google Hangout and we stop sharing, as I was saying, I hope that you've found something of interest in there, and I hope that the people who watched that live found it a little bit more entertaining than just listening to my voice and watching this broadcast. Thank you.